This one is up north in Adilabad. You can begin to see the Islamic influences in the architecture. And this person actually looks after the stepwell. He took a stick and then put it to the bottom and pulled it out so we could gauge the level of it. At the bottom, we were able to look at a Nandi. So this gentleman actually drained the water for us to be able to see the Nandi. That's not the position in which it was intended to be. It must have been hidden there from people who were trying to destroy it, or we don't know the reason why it's there, but it's under the water. And this one is here in Shamshabad. This picture actually establishes the fact that architecture, like culture, like every other aspect of culture in Telangana, is so syncretic, because this is neither a very South Indian gopuram. It's got touches of Mughal architecture, of Rajasthani architecture, and it's got a wall surrounding it, which is like the wall of a typical gadi. So look at this picture on the left. Half of the stepwell, the arches are very Islamic, very Deccani, whereas the other half of them that you see at the far end of the picture are very much from the Kakatiya dynasty. This is also a very large well. The day we first went to see it, we hadn't really taken a tape, but the picture you see here is one of the architects on our team who's 6 feet 2 inches. So we made him go down to the bottom, and we kind of gauged the height of the well by looking at him, and we assume that it's about 36, 38 feet high. There are galleries all around this because people who came from the villages actually came here, they left their belongings, they washed themselves, got ready, and then visited the temple there. Syncretic style, here there are Shankhu, Chakram, there's a Namam, all this in a very Islamic arch. So culture really here in this part of the country is a combination of so many things and an amalgamation of so many things. Right at the top, picture on the left, please look at the bottom there, there's a whole row of pigeons. It's the first time that I've come across a row of pigeons being carved on a temple gopuram. And there are these men or women, we are not quite sure, sitting in the corners and holding their knees. So these are the kind of things that we see here, which are typical of Telangana. In Sangareddy, there's a lot more detailing of the well, lot more imagery. And this is called a Ratanam. Ratanam is the Telugu word for the pulley, the wheel that is used for the pulley. And interestingly, when a zamindar owned a stepwell and he let other people use the water, he charged them a tax, and the tax was called a Ratana tax. So the very first and the very basic form of taxation was the use of water. So water became a commodity that was shared and it was taxed. And the Ratana tax then went up the hierarchy of society till it reached the Nizam of Hyderabad. This is an agricultural stepwell. Again, from the top, you don't see anything. It's very small, very odd shaped at the bottom. But for students of architecture, this picture actually illustrates a simple thing called a trabeated form of construction, which is a whole series of posts, lintels, and beams, all made out of concrete. There are pictures of elephants, of Ganesh, and again, fertility symbols, pictures of Annapakshis and Hamsams. Each of these has a kind of religious symbolism. This one is in the city. After the great flood of the Musi, the Nizam of Hyderabad got together a team of people headed by a cartographer called Mun, and Mr. Mun actually mapped out the whole city. So every property shows the roads, the names of the owner, in this case Rashidud-Dawla, and B for Bauli, which you can see at the bottom, just above the word Rashidud-Dawla. So every tree, everything was mapped, including the positions of the wells. So even till today, when we are looking for stepwells in the old city, we use these maps done in 1918 and we're able to find them. So Rashidud-Dawla's grandson or great-grandson was a classmate of mine in school. And he would tell us every summer that they spent the vacation in the grandfather's bagh, and there was a well there and they would all swim in the well. None of us really believed him. We thought he was just exaggerating. But when I began to research this, I wrote to him. He lives in New Jersey and he sent me these pictures. Lo and behold, it's the same Stepwell. And he told us interesting stories of how the women of the house would go here in the summer and they would exchange recipes, they would string together flowers, matrimonial alliances would be discussed sitting here. So the Stepwell actually had a purpose. This picture also shows us the parapet wall, and the serrations that you see in the parapet wall were to allow the rainwater runoff from the surface to enter the Stepwell and to flow down the sloped chhaja and into the water surface. These are pictures of that Stepwell. It continues to exist today. One of our team members wanted to get pictures. It was a little difficult because the property is disputed now, and the people who were there, who claimed to be the owners, were suspicious of our aims and ambitions and who we were and what we wanted the picture for. So my colleague actually very quickly took these pictures and came back. So this is a typical Stepwell that you find in the older part of the city. So Stepwells of Hyderabad. We look at Deccani miniature paintings again, and besides, of course, the people in it and so on, what this establishes that there were walled gardens, which were called bags. And here is a picture of a pleasure garden in Hyderabad, painted in 1759, and you can see that there is a very formally laid out garden. So the bag, as we are beginning to know it, is showing up. But where did the water come from? So here's another miniature painting that shows a char bagh, a typical Mughal tradition of a garden divided into 4 quadrants. And at the top right hand, you can see a well and the water flowing from the well into the canal. So this is the first evidence that wells actually were important ways of irrigating these private bags. So have you ever stopped to think why so many places are called bags in Hyderabad? We began to list them, and this list is not complete, but 27, 30 places in Hyderabad. Amin Bagh, Kanchan Bagh, Kundan Bagh, Shiv Bagh, you name it, they're there. So Bagh was because of the baghs. My theory is that Bhagyamati, as people say, never really existed. Hyderabad was called Bagnagar because of this huge kind of concentration of pleasure gardens all across it, both to the north and the south of the Musi River. Here also are places called Bauli, Gachi Bauli, Doodh Bauli. I can keep going on and on. Engine Bauli, Badi Bauli, each of them has a story. Engine Bauli has a very interesting story because it was the first electrically operated pump that actually pumped water from the well to the palace right on the top. So we are now beginning to get an understanding of these. Golconda was at the intersection of very, very important trade routes that through medieval history of India, one started at Masulipattnam, touched Golconda and went up to Surat in the northwest or came down to Goa. So anything that came to Hyderabad came through this route. And therefore people began to live on this route. And one such temple which was built here, not only as a temple, but for people to rest after traveling on this, was Sitaram Bagh, which continues to exist even today. These are archival pictures. One picture shows us 4 galleries. One picture shows us 2 galleries. So we went and took permission to document this. Interestingly, this well has never gone dry. There's always water in it. Despite the level of groundwater dropping all around, the water here has never gone dry. So the people who own Sitaram Bagh originally came from Rajasthan, and therefore certain features of steps in the corners replicate what we see in Rajasthan. And here again is our team of students and a faculty member telling them what to do. So this has been a learning experience, not just for us, but for architecture students who've come along with us. EFLU campus, very interesting because it once belonged to this formidable woman called Malakabai Chanda. She was not just a courtesan, she was a war strategist, she was a poet, she was a very rich woman, and she was given this jagir of land, which parts of today are Osmania University, and all of the EFLU campus. And here on the EFLU campus is a stepwell. And this is an archival picture of it. This is how it looks today. But here's an interesting story. The students and everyone on the campus used to throw in paper, empty beer bottles, plastic, styrofoam, till these 4 students got together and said, let's clean up the stepwell. And bucket by bucket, they began to take it out till it reached the notice of the Vice Chancellor, who then funded the cleaning up of the stepwell. And once it was cleaned, he called Pandit Jasraj to sit and sing there. And people who went to that concert, where he sang without amplification and without lighting, except with small diyas, said it was one of the most magical evenings because the sound ricocheted and resonated off the surface of the water.